Hello, and I have a really good feeling about this. Welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by a younger version of my co-host, Andrew Williams. How you doing today, Andrew?
You know,
Great. Still great. Still, Andrew, you're nothing if not consistent. Uh, have you done any holiday shopping yet, Andrew? It's the end of the year here. We're about to roll into the last month of the year. It's almost go time. Are you an early holiday shopper?
not this year. I have concepts of a plan, and
Okay.
I know what I'm getting people by and large, but I haven't bought it yet. So I will be
Just got
doing
to pull the
that.
trigger.
I'm just seeing if anything gets a Black Friday sale,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then
Yeah.
I will pull the trigger and do it. Yep. How about yourself?
Some of the bigger things for the kids are done. It's really all the little. I mean, I've got like a million siblings and extended family and multiple sets of parents. It's a lot of people I got to buy for. So it's usually a big spree of like, okay, 5 people are getting a new, thermos or whatever, and fight. The little stuff we got to fill in. But some of the big stuff, it's hidden somewhere in this house. Maybe I shouldn't say that on a podcast.
You're a hide it in the house kind of guy. You don't get a story.
It's pretty. I mean, no, we're not that extreme. Hide it in the house. At most, store it in something like in my parents' house until like a week before or whatever. At most, but usually it's just don't tell my kids. It's just in our closet, just behind some clothes. It's not that well hidden.
No, I never are.
Andrew, it's the final week of our current theme here because each week we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Star Wars prequel month, and this week we are talking the 2018 film Solo, a Star Wars story. Andrew, I was about to say this movie is not that old. It just came out a couple years ago. 2018 was 6 years ago. It's about to be 7 years ago. That's I feel like this movie came out. This movie came out right before the pandemic, right? The pandemic was just 2 years ago. So how is this movie not 3 years old?
I like to not think about it.
Well, I'm asking you to think about that exactly. Take your mind back 7 years. What's your history with this movie? Is this one that you caught in theaters?
I did. 2018. So May 2018. I was in Chicago by that point. So I saw it. Probably not as eagerly anticipated as maybe some movies. But I think I saw the positive word of mouth and decided to go check it out. And so I liked it. I enjoyed watching it. I bought it, and I have occasionally watched it since. I generally agree with the internet discourse that the movie is underrated, I guess, a little bit, or maybe just underseen more so than anything. I think there's just a lot of fun stuff here, so I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, this is one that was kind of widely dismissed before it ever came out. Not even that, oh, that looks like it's going to be bad. It's just sort of a feeling of like, seems unnecessary. Like, oh, why are we diving into one of the main characters that we've already seen so much in this series? A main character portrayed by one of the most famous actors in the world. Now we're seeing a different actor portray this character. It just seemed like there wasn't a lot of buzz or interest going into the release of this movie. But like you're saying, I've heard nothing but positive word of mouth about it since then. Now that didn't translate into a big box office, which we'll get to, but this movie has its defenders. I haven't heard really from anybody that actually saw the movie that thought it was garbage or anything less than entertaining. I've always heard pretty good stuff about it. I myself never watched it until this week preparing for this podcast, and now I get to join the chorus of people that goes, yeah, it's pretty fun. That was pretty good. You compare this with the other movie in the A Star Wars Story series, of which there were many planned, but only two released. Rogue One, which had a massive fan reaction. I mean, some people regard that as the best or one of the best Star Wars movies, period. And it introduced, brand new characters, which I think was why people were more on board to see like a different little corner of the universe versus focusing, again, on a character we already know pretty well.
There's a bit of an elephant in the room to discuss when it comes to Solo's release as well, in that Solo is released 6 months after Last Jedi. And there is
really weird stuff happened here.
There is a not insignificant part of the reaction to this movie that was a general backlash to Disney's treatment of Star Wars at that point. And so I think when you combine the general kind of lack of enthusiasm for a Han Solo movie without Harrison Ford into the fans' displeasure at things like Last Jedi, I think you end up with, what happens to this movie financially. So, more to come.
Disney had these massive plans to basically release a Star Wars movie every year. Every other year was going to be a mainline entry, and then the off years would be these spin-off stories. So we got Rogue One, and we got Solo, but the performance of this movie kind of killed this idea. But we know that a Boba Fett movie was planned at one point in various stages of development. That gets scrapped, turns into The Mandalorian. Obi-Wan movie was planned. Obviously, that eventually evolves years later into the streaming series. A young Yoda movie was planned. Disney was eager to make their money back on the billions they forked over for the Star Wars universe. But mainline movies do pretty well financially. But these spin-offs eventually just get kiboshed, and, Disney's been off and running on the Star Wars front on their streaming service, more so with all the extended universe, prequel, backstory, what have you, type stuff. So this movie has it's sort of a turning point for Disney's plans with Star Wars. So let's take it back here. This movie is released May 25th, 2018. It's made on a budget of at least $275 million. There's a lot of reports for this budget. It could have easily gone over $300 million. We'll get into some of the reasons why, but as it stands, it is one of the most expensive movies ever made. Which, you look at that list, you see a lot of Marvel stuff. You see, like, Endgame, Infinity War. Those don't surprise me. Some of the mainline Star Wars movies don't surprise me. Justice League is up there. We've discussed on this podcast. I think that, Justice League has a bloated budget for a very similar reason to Solo, which is the change in directors. But just the idea that Disney is, their spin-off Star Wars movie becomes one of the highest gross, or becomes one of the most expensive movies ever made. It's like, we've lost control of something. Like, what is this? This is not how you make money at the box office. This is me telling Disney how to make money.
Well, the change in directors for Solo, I think, is a huge part of this. This is a Justice League situation where, you had a set of directors that got pretty deep into production of Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. And we'll talk more about them in a minute, but it's estimated that Ron Howard, when he comes on board, reshoots like 70% of the film, including having to bring in new actors for certain roles. And
enough to get sole directing credit.
And also done in such a way that, but I mean, if you reshoot 70% of a movie, you've essentially made it twice, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, you have effectively made this movie twice. So yeah, Solo on the Wikipedia page, it cracks the top 20 for most expensive movies ever made. For Star Wars: The Force Awakens is apparently still the most expensive movie ever made, with Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom right after it. Just so strange. Not even Jurassic World Dominion, the last one, the fifth one,
with all the legacy characters coming back.
Yeah, the legacy one is 19. It's after Solo. Anyway, Yeah, you throw in enough situations like that. Justice League, oddly, only it's tied for it's a three-way tie for number 14, with Justice League, Last Jedi, and Pirates of the Caribbean, one of them. But yeah, you throw all that together, you end up with a budget that's just massive. You can't, you take a movie like this, you shoot it twice. Yeah, it's gonna cost money.
The movie fails to turn a profit. It brings in $393.2 million worldwide at the box office. You factor in marketing, they're losing money on this thing. Critically, it's pretty well received. It holds a very nice score of 69% on Rotten Tomatoes. Audiences, though, this is a little puzzling to me, Andrew. The audience rating is 63%. We've talked about it already. This movie has pretty good word of mouth of people that have seen it. Maybe there's a little bit of that bad faith brigading coming in. You mentioned this coming in the wake of The Last Jedi. I really don't know. I was a little puzzled by that score.
Yeah, a little bit. Still largely, it's not too far removed from the tomato score. Tomato score is based off of 482 reviews, so this is not a small sample size. But of course, critics will point, or detractors will point to Last Jedi having a fresh score, which is correct. But yeah, you've got a lot of factors in there. It is only 25,000 plus ratings for the audience, which seems like a lot, but you take as a comparison for probably any other Star Wars movie, it's probably in the hundreds of thousands. And so fans just not having a whole lot of enthusiasm / input the way they do for others. Like you look at Last Jedi, it's got a critic score of 91%. But the popcorn meter is 41% based off 100,000 rating, 100,000 plus. So you get just, I think the fans aren't coming out to say they liked Solo as much as they didn't like something else. But yeah, a little surprising though. Like it's odd that you see the audience score on a movie like this be less than the critic score.
The movie is written by Jonathan and Lawrence Kasdan. This is a father and son duo. Take a look at the dad first. Lawrence Kasdan. Incredible filmography. We're talking Empire Strikes Back. We're talking Raiders of the Lost Ark, Return of the Jedi, The Bodyguard, huge hit, Dreamcatcher, The Force Awakens. Stunners, Andrew, through and through.
Yeah, the dude is great, top to bottom. He's got obviously a.
You're just gonna let me get away with throwing Dreamcatcher into that list, Andrew? Dude, I was dangling out there for you to jump onto, and you just let it slide.
I am, it's I'm sure there are dozens of fan of that movie.
Future episode of this podcast, no doubt.
I'm sure there's a Stephen King month in there somewhere. We talked about doing a Stephen King. We certainly have.
We've discussed it off mic plenty of times. I'm sure it'll happen
one day. Anyway, like you said, a kind of a who's who. There's things like he's got Star Wars, he's got Indiana Jones, he's got more Star Wars, he's got everything. He actually has a really funny movie he made in 1990 called "I Love You to Death" with Kevin Kline, Tracy Ullman, a bunch of others. I actually think it's insanely funny. I think it's really, really good. But like you said, Bodyguard, Wyatt Earp gets in on the Kevin Costner Western tradition, which continued and then died this year with Horizon and American Saga or whatever it was. Just tons of stuff in there. And speaks for itself. There's really not much more to say about Lawrence Kasdan. He's a veritable icon when it comes to pop culture, and his contribution to things like Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark, that speaks for itself. And yeah.
Now, he and his son, Jonathan, do not write this together from beginning to end. Jonathan comes in later in the process to help complete it after Lawrence is pulled away for a different project. But Jonathan, no stranger to the world of screenwriting, has lots of TV credits before this. Shows like Freaks and Geeks and Dawson's Creek. Obviously, very big hits. starring the Utes, the young people shows. So it
To
makes a lot of
what?
sense to me
Um,
that a movie like this, especially with its original directors, to bring in some of that youthful energy with Jonathan Caston.
it is. I think there was a kind of deliberate attempt to kind of bring that in, and bring in that a fresh perspective. Not to say that Lawrence Kasdan doesn't have his knowledge to can't contribute these things, but I think they saw Jonathan as being able to contribute. Um, and it is the displeasure of the Kasdans that arguably is at least part of why our original directors are dismissed.
All right. So the movie is directed by Ron Howard. We've talked about that. We'll talk about Ron Howard in a moment. The original directors were Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. A very, very hot creative duo at the time and still to this day. I love everything these guys touch, whether it's writing and directing, which they probably come to prominence with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. They're also the directors, not writers, of 21 and 22 Jump Street. And then they write and direct the Lego Movie, which takes everybody by surprise by how damn good it is. They are some of the creators of my favorite comedic show of all time, Last Man on Earth, and they direct the pilot. In fact, they have a very long-standing collaboration and work process with Will Forte, who I praise every chance that I get. Going all the way back to Clone High, which is just a hilarious animated show that Will Forte voices the clone of Abe Lincoln. And they've got their fingers all over things. The Spider-Verse movies are their babies, whether they're mostly producing, but it's sort of just kind of their style. They have this like distinct style where even if they're not the ones in the chair, you can feel their influence. Something like The Mitchells versus the Machines. Fantastic animated movie from a few years ago. They're not the writers or directors, they're just the producers, but it feels like a Lord and Miller joint, if you will. And I love this idea of Disney doing this Star Wars spin-off and bringing in people with such a distinctive tone. Like, I don't think Disney would ever hire these two to direct a mainline Star Wars movie, but to let them have a spin-off movie that they can make their own and have their own feel and their own tone sounds fantastic. And it seems like Phil Lord and Christopher Miller we're thinking exactly what I'm talking about right now. Like, make this our own. But it seems that that is not actually what Disney had in mind. When it comes to big franchise like this, whether it's Star Wars or Marvel, 007, there's a certain sort of tone set by the studio, the certain box that you've got to play in. And they typically don't hire people with super distinctive styles because they want everything to sort of fall in line. And like I said, while this is a spinoff, you would think they might want to stretch that a little bit. It seems like they wanted things to still, quote unquote, feel like Star Wars. You mentioned The Last Jedi. There's very early in that movie, there's that part where Poe is talking to the what's his name? The red-haired guy from Ex Machina. Domhnall Gleeson?
Oh, Domhnall Gleeson, yeah.
Yeah.
What's his face? The Hux.
Hux, there it is. He's talking to Hux from his ship, and then he acts like the losing connection. He's like, hello, can you hear me? And it's this... It sort of stands out. Like, I'm not attacking Last Jedi. I love Last Jedi. But I know that bumps people. That rubs them the wrong way. It feels like out of place, tone-wise, for Star Wars. I feel like this movie could have been a tone like that extrapolated across an entire film. Lord and Miller are very comedic in everything they do. They always have heart and like genuinely great storytelling beats, but it's always through the lens of comedy. But as they were making the movie, Disney did not like the tone. Lord and Miller didn't want to change the way they want to make the movie, so they step away and just have producing credits at the end of the day. Ron Howard is brought in to complete the film, which is wild because look, we'll talk about Ron Howard in a minute. But Andrew, what's your reaction to a Star Wars movie directed by Lord and Miller? I mean,
It seems like
sounds
a slam
awesome,
dunk.
right?
Like it sounds like
Yes.
a slam dunk. Like it seems like the exact kind of thing. I mean, and obviously the change was made before Last Jedi ever came out, but you know, if there was anything that could have easily gotten a lot of goodwill back into your favor, I think Lord and Miller making a Star Wars movie would have been it. But you know, there's a Hollywood Reporter article written about the kind of split and how it happens. Lord and Miller basically said they were making a comedy film, just like anything else that they'd done. Obviously, it could have serious overtones, it could have serious undertones, but they were led to believe that, you know, we're making a movie that's meant to be funny. And uh, they also were encouraging improvising from the script, which apparently Kasdan wasn't a big fan of. He was apparently unhappy with scenes not being filmed like word for word, like very much, you know, my text. My text needs to live through these characters, and that's it.
The sacred
Um,
text.
the sacred texts. Oh, read them, have you? But well, but uh, so they would shoot the scene like as it was written. Then they would encourage improv, but there was, I guess, concerns from Disney that they were getting too far off the story of the script. They would shoot things with fewer angles than Lucasfilm was expecting, which would potentially impact the editing. The Miller and Lord were unhappy when Lawrence Kasdan was brought to the set, feeling like he was specifically kind of put there to like keep them in line. So really, at the end of the day, it just was not a good fit. I think if Lord and Miller had written that script, it probably would have been a little bit different because then Disney would know what their script was. They would know what their intentions were. It would have put everybody kind of in the right box coming out the gate. Whereas this was kind of a Star Wars stalwart kind of shepherding this script to completion and then feeling like this directing duo wasn't being respectful of that, which I don't think that respect is a question that needs to be brought up, but I don't think respect is the issue. It's just a very big clash in styles. It's a little bit like Taika Waititi making Thor Ragnarok, but at that point, the expectations and kind of everything for Thor were a little bit lower than everybody else. So I think kind of coming in and doing something pretty wild was fine and worked. Whereas
I
this
like your
feels
point
like it's
about
kind of the
if they
opposite.
would have written it, it probably would have been a different story. Because I was thinking James Gunn in the MCU. You know, he gets the Guardians movies. Those all feel like James Gunn movies because
Yep.
it's his creative input from day one. Versus some of the other movies that kind of fall in line to the similar tone.
Yeah, so it sucks, but like it's one of those things where like I sort of get it, like I kind of understand, but at the same time, like, have you not watched any of Lord and Miller's movies? Do you not know what it is they do? Like this is
Right.
it's one of those things where it feels like you hired someone and then you're upset they're doing what you expect them to do. And I like Lord and Miller a lot. I mean, they're responsible for some of the best stuff out there. You know, I mean, the Spider-Verse movies, Mitchells versus the Machines, I think is actually a great example of one that's a little bit more underrated. I don't know that a lot of people saw it because it's I think it's on Netflix.
Yeah,
Um,
straight to streaming.
and but like they also were involved with a television show I really really liked called The After Party, which was like a murder mystery show where um every episode was a character's, you know, contribution or version of the events, but they were always told with like a different genre. So you'd have like a musical episode, you'd have like a noir episode, you'd have all these cool things that you could do. So you got to play with all the different methods. Season one is particularly great. Season two is not quite as good, but still very fun. But then, like you said, the rest of their stuff speaks for itself. But they directed the pilot for Brooklyn Nine-Nine. They directed, like you said, on Last Man on Earth. They did writing 17 episodes of How I Met Your Mother, and then or rather they were producers of a bunch of episodes, wrote a couple of episodes like Clone High, another great example. Like, yeah, so I don't know how you hire these guys that don't understand what you're getting. But apparently Disney did not. So it is what it is.
It's wild to me the reason they split is, bumping heads, creative differences. You would think Disney would go and hire like the most run of the mill journeyman director, a name that doesn't immediately spring to mind, but they're responsible for a lot of. They hire Ron Howard, like one of the most prolific directors of all time. But I still think it's a good fit because we've had a chance to talk about Ron Howard on this podcast before. I don't remember off the top of my head why, but I'm pretty sure I said on that episode that Ron Howard's interesting because he doesn't have a distinct feel. I don't think you can watch a Ron Howard movie and immediately know that it's Ron Howard, which isn't a bad thing by any means. But like, even Steven Spielberg, who really runs the gamut with his genres, he's got hallmarks that you're going to recognize. The Spielberg reaction face. Ron Howard doesn't. He has very impressive high quality filmography, but from movie to movie, I don't necessarily feel his touch or style, which some would say that's the mark of a great director. It's just kind of how you view a director's job. But in a weird way, there we go. Yeah, we talked about the Grinch.
And Ed TV to a lesser extent, but mostly the Grinch. That's what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah, so this movie doesn't feel like the Grinch to me as an example.
No.
Or Apollo 13, or all this stuff he's responsible for. So I guess in a way I feel like he's a good fit because he will stay within the box they want to give him, but he just seems above. That's not the right word, but he's got to be expensive. Like you probably could have found someone.
He's got to be expensive. During our prequels discussion, I pointed out he turned down Phantom Menace. Like this is a man who's not directed Star Wars movies before, and has kind of avoided it because he saw this as kind of George Lucas's thing. So I wouldn't be shocked. I don't want to say he only took the job just to help out, but I wouldn't be shocked if him coming in was kind of everybody just kind of collectively being like, all right, do us this solid, please. And, they threw him some funding for something later. I don't know. Or maybe they'll do something with him more. I don't know. But he's, it's kind of, it feels backhanded to say he's like the ultimate journeyman. But that's kind of how I feel about it. Like when you want somebody to bring in your movie and you want it on budget, on time, exactly like on script as written, boom, that's Ron Howard's your guy. Like you think about
if Chris Columbus is the ultimate journeyman for the family film, Ron Howard's the journeyman for the adventure film, right? The spectacle film.
Into it, yeah. Like you think about things like Rush, the racing movie he made with Daniel Bruhl and Chris Hemsworth, or like even like anything, just like this Cinderella Man, the Da Vinci Code, like the movies your parents go watch it, the movies your parents go to the theaters to watch, like that sort of thing. But like, yeah, it's like it just felt odd when they announced Ron Howard. I was like, that's wild. I was like, that's a little strange. I wouldn't have expected that. But at the same time, I think they were also trying to particularly project this air of stability in the aftermath of kind of firing these directors midway through the movie. And I think Ron Howard is the ultimate in directorial stability. Basically, if Ron Howard's directing your movie, there is an expectation that comes with that. And obviously at that point, I think they knew the budget was already way out of control. So you brought in the guy who's known for being on budget, being on time, and being super efficient. So I think it's an interesting choice. I was definitely surprised by it. But at the same time, I definitely understand that if you are pivoting that deep into production, I can definitely see why Ron Howard was the one who got the call.
Well, Andrew, let's jump into this thing. That's the story of how it came to be, but what about the final product? Let's talk about everything that works, everything we like, all the positives about Solo, a Star Wars story. Andrew, you ready?
Yes.
A couple of scoundrels named Han and Kira seek to escape their dangerous homeworld of Corellia. Only Han is able to get away, but he promises to return for his friend and partner. Han joins the Imperial Navy with hopes of becoming a great pilot, but later deserts his duty to join a renegade gang of smugglers led by Tobias Beckett. Han hopes that after their next big score, he'll be able to return for Kira, but their job is thwarted by a gang of space pirates. Han and Tobias visit the crime boss Dryden Voss, with whom Tobias owns a debt, to offer to take on another mission to repay him. Han is surprised to learn that Kira now works for Voss and urges her to leave with him after their next job. To complete the mission, Han and the gang seek the help of Lando Calrissian and his ship, the Millennium Falcon. But just before delivering the stolen goods, Tobias double-crosses Han, but Han anticipated this and hatched a plan of his own. There's a lot of moving parts here. We're hopping from planet to planet, meeting new characters along the way. I try to condense it as much as possible, but I would not say this is a simple story, not as a good or bad thing, but there's the movie, once it gets going, it's really trucking.
Absolutely. It's a lot of information to cover here. We got to get through a lot of stuff, and it wastes no time going place to place to place.
Well, we can talk about this adventure, talk about what happened place to place to place. But first, we're going to talk about the cast of this film, starting with the high point. Best casting, best performance of the movie, because every episode we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the call of duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off here. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Solo, a Star Wars story?
I got to go with not really our title character necessarily, but one of our notably recasted characters, and one that was routinely pretty much a highlight that everybody mentioned coming out of this movie. I got to go with Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian.
Hell yes. Also getting my Mark Strong Award. It feels like a slam dunk. I'm glad we're on the same page. I wasn't sure if you were going to throw a curveball here, but yeah, absolutely. But continue. Why is he getting your Mark Strong Award?
Because he's perfect.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when Alden was announced as Han Solo, there was definitely kind of a collective, because Alden was kind of untested largely for the most part. There was, and we'll talk about him in a minute. I think he does a good job here. But stepping into that role of Han Solo, stepping into the belt and blaster of Han Solo is no small task for anyone to take on. By contrast, when Donald Glover was announced as Lando Calrissian, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, like people were into it. Like it was like the opposite. People were just like, this is awesome. And like once they showed like pictures, they showed like set photos and stuff, people were like, this is it. Like this is awesome. This is great. And so
even before the movie came out, people were saying, well, why isn't this a Lando movie? Like, doesn't that make more sense to do a spinoff of a small side character we did not see much of to get their backstory versus, again, one of the main characters in the series? And I also think it helps that, I mentioned earlier, they're recasting a character played by Harrison Ford, who's one of the most recognizable actors in the world. But on top of that, this is one of his key performances. We've seen him as Han Solo again and again and again. Billy D. Williams, not as big of a star as Harrison Ford, I'll say that, but still obviously a huge star in his own right. But we've seen him play this character much less. There's much less of that hardwired in your brain. This is exactly what every line on this man's face looks like. And then on top of that, we're going much younger. I think it's just easier in our brain to picture someone else taking on the younger role versus, how old is Harrison Ford, the first movie? Like 35? Like a younger version of someone that's already pretty young. It felt weird. But yeah, this one, even from the announcement, like you're saying, just much more hype, I would say.
So much so that a further project with Glover as the character is in various stages of development, has been in development.
Yeah, it's
Whereas,
gonna be a series, gonna be a movie. We'll see if it ever happens.
well, the last word is that it was going to be a movie, but that Glover and his brother were now the ones writing it too. So, I don't know what'll happen with that. Obviously, Disney is seemingly ramping up for more Star Wars movies. We've been hearing a lot about that. Sounds like it'll be kicking off with the Grogu and Mandalorian movie, and then that'll be kind of Disney's big return of Star Wars to the silver screen. And silver screen. What a great way to put it. But
You're just reflecting on that phrase.
yeah, reflecting on the silver screen. Nice. But but like I said, the fact, despite this movie being a bomb necessarily financially, the positive reception to Lando is so good that it has led to anticipated and planned development of a further project with Lando as that character, which I think is I think that's about as good a statement you can get as far as the popularity and reception of his performance, in that despite the movie being financially underwhelming, they see value in keeping him as that character around.
I think another thing here is that Donald Glover, people loved him on Community. He started blowing up with his musical project. Literally almost said the Great Gambino. Childish Gambino, and he started to get more supporting roles. Like, he shows up in, he's got a long history with Spider-Man. Then he shows up for this cameo in Homecoming, and it's like people were like waiting for the breakout Donald Glover role, which I think in movie form we're still waiting for. I think there's still going to be like a vehicle for Donald Glover that blows up, but he's got I know the series Atlanta is huge for him. I mean, he's doing just fine, don't get me wrong, but like he has a huge following, and people are just waiting to like embrace the big Donald Glover project. But this casting is just so perfect. I mean, one thing Donald Glover and Billy Dee Williams have in common is they're just cool as hell. I mean, Lando Calrissian, Riz, is right there in the middle of the name. George Lucas really had some foresight planning this character's name. Just cool, and both of these guys just emit, just have that vibe of just cool as hell. Take this walk with me here. Conan O'Brien, I think on his podcast, I'm trying to remember where the story even comes from, but he tells the story of Billy Dee Williams, where at the end, Billy Dee just goes, "I've got to go." And then anytime Conan O'Brien talks about Billy Dee Williams, that's his entire impression. That's what he works in, is "I've got to go." And he's just got that swagger. Donald Glover, cool as hell in this movie, just gliding across the screen. I could have used 500% more of him. I loved every time he was in this movie. He is, in the synopsis I described Han and Kira as like scoundrels. He's like a step beyond that, and that's kind of always been true, I guess, of Lando, is that he's a little more willing to get his hands dirty, whereas Han Solo is always kind of being pulled more to the good side, and that stays true to the character here. But yeah, I could have used way more of him. I can't wait for a series or movie or whatever. I want to see more Donald Glover as Lando. I think it's fantastic, spot on casting. I'm glad we both enjoyed this performance. It's fantastic.
Yeah. It's fantastic. It is exactly what if there's a performance in this movie that lives up to the hype, like I said, it is Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian. You think that's where the term Riz came from? You think all the kids went back and watched Empire Strikes Back and were like, man,
1,000%, yes.
Riz, that's definitely what happened. It's definitely how it happened.
They could have shortened his name in any number of ways. I mean, he's got land. The guy he's really got land. He's got dough. Cal. Guy's full Riz, of Cal.
Nah, you got to go Riz, man. Riz is the only one that makes sense.
All right. Alden Ehrenreich. steps into the role of Han Solo, I don't care who there's not a single person they could have cast and people would have been like, oh man, that's awesome. I mean, this guy had an uphill battle from day one stepping into these shoes.
Yep.
I don't even particularly think he looks like Harrison Ford. Usually when they do these kind of castings, like, they get someone that really looks like, again, the older version of the character. They don't seem too concerned with that. They just want a good performance. And the best thing I can say about it is on screen, I don't think he ever looks like the pressure's getting to him. It ever looks like he's like, man, the weight of this performance. He's very fast and loose, seems very comfortable, and that is like the absolute highest compliment I give this performance, because it must have been, I mean, what a task to take on, young Han Solo. But he rises to the occasion 1000%. I think the script can be pretty heavy-handed with Han Solo isms. We've got to have the dice, we've got to have the vest, we've got to have these lines, we've got to have this blaster. But in his performance, I don't feel like he's ever impersonating Harrison Ford. He's just playing the character as best he can. And I think that's a very wise acting decision on his part.
And
he didn't like break his nose and make it crooked to look like Harrison Ford.
Didn't spend years as a carpenter making cabinets and stuff. I think that was a deliberate intention from not just the actor, but also the creative teams. I don't think they wanted somebody to come in and try to be Harrison Ford. That would have been disastrous. I mean, and if you look at the list of names for this, I mean, it's Chandler Riggs, Rami Malek, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Tom Felton, Ed Westwick, Glenn Powell, Charlie Cox, Blake Jenner, Miles Teller, Ansel Elgort, Dave Franco, Jack Rayner, Scott Eastwood. I mean, like any basic young, semi-hot Hollywood actor that was about age 30. Sounds like they got brought in for this. I think Miller said they saw over 3,000 people, which seems insane to me. Like, it seems insane to me that you can physically see 3,000 people for a part. But, and so they went after just about everybody they could, like anybody, like pretty much. And most of them don't look like Harrison Ford. And so I think it was a deliberate intention to just look for somebody who was going to serve the purposes the movie needed them to, versus trying to do some kind of Harrison Ford impersonation. That would have just been bad. And it's interesting because, again, you hate to do it, but you point to Donald Glover as Lando. And I wouldn't say at any point that I feel like Donald Glover is doing a Billy D. Williams impression, but his performance is still somehow very much Lando. Like, it never feels like it's a very hard line to walk, basically living in the spirit of a character without feeling like you're just doing an impression. And like, I think Glover does a great job at that. And I think with Alden here, he's specifically like, I'm just going to serve this movie and do what I need to do for the script. I'm not going to sit here and try to, be Harrison Ford. And the movie, I think, is better for that.
Mark Strong award winner Woody Harrelson plays Tobias Beckett. This is casting that I don't even really remember. Like, I went to watch this movie this week and I was kind of surprised Woody Harrelson was in it. Like, I'm obviously it was announced, people knew, but it just didn't stick with me. Maybe because he's playing an original character, as far as I know. Maybe this character came from comics, I don't know. But Tobias Beckett, he's sort of the guy that's going to show Han the ropes on how to live this smuggler lifestyle. It's how Han begins his journey to become the character, the smuggler that we know he is in the Star Wars installments. I mean, gosh, we've got to talk about Woody Harrelson a number of times in this podcast. Fantastic. One of our finest actors. Great character actor. You can throw him in anything, in any role. And he is always going to rise to the occasion. He's hilarious. Gosh, we talked about it back on Ed TV, I know for sure. Obviously picking up the Mark Strong Award from Venom, Let There Be Carnage. But great. Love this guy. Awesome. One of my favorite movies from the 90s, White Men Can't Jump. I mean, he's just true to Mark Strong Award fashion. He is great in any movie, even if that movie suffers in quality. His performance is never going to be the problem. And last thing, I have a Woody Harrelson impression, but it's silent. It's just this look here. It's man, I gotta get it right. He's always, like you raise your mouth up to like just below your nose. That's what that's my Woody Harrelson impression.
Tremendous.
Make your chin as big as possible. Stick your jaw out.
I could do that, man. I got that for sure. No, I think that's very funny. For all our folks that at home that couldn't see it, it's pretty good. But I like Woody Harrelson a lot. Like you said, you mentioned White Man Can't Jump. You mentioned stuff like that. True Detective, where he's a master of that face. He spends basically like 80% of that series just looking at Matthew McConaughey like that. Anytime Matthew McConaughey is like, I don't sleep, I just dream of a forgotten town and the mysteries inside of it. And Woody Harrelson's like, I just need you to stop saying odd stuff. Like, just don't speak like this. But it's the character is interesting. When Harrelson was cast as Han Solo's mentor, there were people that thought he would be playing Gareth Shrike from some of the expanded universe stuff, kind of the person who did raise Han Solo. They opted to go in a different direction, which is fine. They don't need to do everything by the book. But yeah, it's Woody Harrelson. I mean, he's great. There's not much more you can say about him.
Emilia Clarke plays Kira. Now, I said Kira in the synopsis. I'm really nervous about pronouncing Star Wars names ever since I screwed up Qui-Gon Jinn. I mean, I know I watched this movie this week, but I'm not great with names. So, Andrew, I tried to Google how to say this, and I want you to open a tab and Google, you got to do it exactly, how to pronounce Kira, Q-I''RA, Star Wars. Be sure you add Star Wars in there, because otherwise you'll get different results. Let me know if you get an AI overview. What
Folks,
does your
I'm going
AI
to read
say?
this to you in a dramatic fashion. The name of Emilia Clarke's character in Solo, a Star Wars story, is pronounced Kyra. The QI in English is pronounced with the TJ sound as in cheese and the I sound as in sheep. Finn.
You're getting different
Guys,
results than me, so
AI is real dumb.
you want to know what my AI overview is? I did again how to pronounce QI''RA Star Wars AI overview, and I'm just gonna pronounce the name how I think it's pronounced. It says Kira's name is pronounced quotation marks Kira, QI''RA. Doesn't give me phonetics. It just says in parentheses QI''RA. AI is the worst. I don't want to be that blanket. The
consumer applications of AI are the worst.
The forced nature. Like I want to turn off AI overviews for Google searches because they are not dependable. So what's the point? Why is that always? I want to turn it off. I don't want on my phone. I don't want your predictive text. The other day I hooked my phone up to my car and Google was like, oh, by the way, instead of me reading your text messages to you, I can provide you an AI summary of the text message. And it's like, it's a text. No one's sending me paragraphs long stories that I need you to paraphrase. Like, I don't want you changing the words. Just read to me the thing. There's too much of it. Too much of it. Anyway, where did we land? Do we know how to pronounce this name? There's something dependable I can click on. Let's see. Proper way to pronounce the name from Solo. Is it pronounced Kira or Kyra? Entertainment Weekly provides us with the answer. They do? Oh, here it is. Oh, God. It's taking me to Twitter, and the post is gone, so I don't know. I don't know.
Kira. This video says Kira.
Okay. Yeah, I just found one that said Kira too. Glad we settled that. Glad we decided it's the way I've
Figured that out beforehand.
been saying it all along. Yeah, that's good. Makes for great podcasting. Andrew, this character is played by Emilia Clarke. Talk about people that are really blowing up and hot at the time. Emilia Clarke, she got popular on this TV show called Game of Thrones. It was massively popular. We have talked about her because we covered Terminator Genesis, where she plays Sarah Connor. And again, there's sort of the string of movies that are like trying to launch her from TV to film. So coming in with a lot of hype. As someone who has never watched Game of Thrones, I don't really have any frame of reference for her, but other than like Terminator and this movie, actually, Me Before You, I gotta admit, I did enjoy that movie. She's good, yeah, she's good. She's good at, she starts off in the same place as Han, sort of a street rat, to borrow from Aladdin, and even when she returns to the film, there's a bit of mystery around her, and it's in a way where, like, I don't know if I should trust her, if she's good, if she's bad, where her allegiances lie, and it's never really resolved. It's sort of just this mystery with her character, and I think she plays that energy very well. Sort of, there's always something underneath the surface that we're never quite getting to.
Yeah, the character has got this a little bit like Han Solo in that she's done what she's needed to do to survive. She's done what's needed to kind of keep herself safe, not safe necessarily, but just keep herself in the good graces, and that means she goes to some dark places. Yeah, it's an interesting performance. She's obviously meant to be Han Solo's kind of confidant slash former assumed potential future love interest. They definitely play that up. But ultimately, she does have her own agenda here.
Another alum of the show here, Andrew, Tandy Newton, plays Val Beckett, Tobias's wife and sort of co-leader of their little gang. She dies on their first mission. Something I did not see coming, because Tandy Way is obviously a pretty prolific actress. We got to talk about her back on her Mission Impossible 2 episode. She's been in a ton of stuff, TV and film. Relatively small role here. I was pretty surprised, one, that she died so early, and that, like, she sacrifices her life for just their smuggling job, just for a score. I thought that was a pretty strange decision by the character, Andrew.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it.
Really dedicated to. I mean, I guess they saw that job as, like, ticket to their freedom and out from the ultimate bad guys sort of grasp, but it still seems pretty extreme to me.
Yeah. Actually, she's credited also as Tandy Newton here. I think they abbreviate her name. I don't know what's going on there, but it's her name. She can do what she wants. But yeah, there's just not a whole lot here. I expected a little bit more. I don't know if she was potentially around a little bit more in the original versions, but she is Woody Harrelson's wife. Seemed like a fun character, but like I said, there's not a lot there. But when she is on screen, she's great. But she's always great when she's on my screen. What are we looking at?
Well, I didn't notice the change in her credits, so I wanted to read up on it a little bit. In 2021, she announced that she'd be changing her first name back to its original form of Tandy Way. Tandy was an attempt to basically be more marketable to mainstream Hollywood, but she made the decision to reclaim her original name and be credited as such, beginning with the film Reminiscence in 2021. And she said she would attempt to have corrections applied to her past performances. Andrew, I think it's pretty cool.
That is cool.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge is the voice of L337. Usually just call it
Elite.
L3 in the movie. Uh, Andrew, I never noticed that. I mean, I say never noticed that. It's the first time I've actually looked at this, but
I haven't
Elite.
noticed that in the 10 minutes I've known about this.
um, what if she writes in Elite speak? Like, what if she gets infused with Millennium Falcon anytime the Millennium Falcon prints out anything or displays on the screen? It's all in Elite speak.
All the number, every letter, every possible letter replaced by a number.
Star Wars has always been really good with their droid characters, imbuing them with a distinct personality. I would argue no two of the main droid characters we see across this series are the same. They get wildly different types and performances and personalities, and this one's no different. It's just another great droid character in the Star Wars universe. It's one of the things that I think they do best. I love this performance, love her personality. Honestly, Donald Glover's running away the Mark Strong Award, no doubt, but otherwise, high in the running for Mark Strong, really elevating this movie.
Definitely. I think this is a great performance. It is like you said, we get a lot of fun droids. Rogue One, K2SO, it's another, Alan Tudyk, because that character was an instantly identifiable, memorable droid performance. Obviously, Anthony Daniels, the C-3PO, is probably the originator of that. But it's always a really fun way to see, because the droids always sometimes have these different looks. They have these different vibes. They sometimes have these different purposes. It is very fun, and this character is no exception. Phoebe Waller-Bridge is fantastic. She is great in pretty much everything I've seen her in. I know she contributed to the script for the last James Bond film, No Time to Die, which I thought was
pretty cool.
She then featured as a main character in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the last one of those, and I thought she was really great in it. She's just fantastic, and she's doing a great job pretty much everywhere she's at. Obviously, a whole long set on television, Fleabag probably being the big show that she's known for. She's creator, writer, executive producer on that show. And then just a fantastic repertoire that speaks for itself and is hopefully just getting started.
Paul Bettany plays Dryden Voss, the crime lord, our big bad of the movie. He's got the scarred face. He looks bad. And he's played by Paul Bettany, who I think is really good at looking evil. It's funny that he's so well known for Vision, which is this consummate good guy, but I think Paul Bettany plays a bad guy so well. He has such a distrusting face. He just looks evil. Sounds so extreme. But Andrew, I don't know if I can't remember if I've talked about this before, but the movie Wimbledon, it's this tennis rom-com that he did with Kirsten Dunst. Because of him, I've never seen the movie. I've only seen the cover. I thought this was a horror film. I thought it was a suspense thriller because of the way this man looks on the cover. It's Kirsten Dunst laughing. She's looking down. She's holding her tennis racket. He is staring down the lens. No smile. Looks super menacing. It looks like... Right? Are you looking at this picture? Do you see what I'm seeing here? It looks like
exactly
he, he's gonna kill her in her sleep or something, or he has a big dark secret or whatever. I thought that was the hook of this movie, but apparently it's just a fun rom-com. But Paul Bettany just he's got a villain's face, I have to say.
He does indeed. I can't help but notice that. I thought I was confusing that with what's that other tennis movie you talk about all the time? Match Point?
Yeah.
That's not Paul Bettany in that one, though.
It's James or Jonathan Rhys Meyers. Yeah.
Get my tennis movies mixed up. Yeah, but this Wimbledon cover.
But Spud from Trainspotting is in that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Kirsten Dunst is in a romantic comedy poster. Paul Bettany is not.
Right.
He's
yes.
not. She is. She's got the tennis racket on her head. She's smiling. She looks all, playful and everything. And then Paul Bettany is just like, time to cut your head off with that tennis racket.
It's exactly what he looks like.
I'm literally going to take a string off that tennis racket and cut your head off with it. But that's what he looks like, folks. You're going to look it up and you're going to say, yeah, that's the face of someone who cut your head off with a string from a tennis racket. Yeah, Paul Bettany has this just such an odd look. We've talked about him before. We've talked about some MCU stuff. Did we talk about him there? Talking about somewhere else.
Why did we talk about Paul Bettany?
We talk about Age of Ultron? No,
we haven't done Priest yet. Is it Priest? Legion?
Yeah, Priest,
what am I thinking of?
He's in both of those, Legion and Priest.
Oh my gosh! So I'm sure we'll talk
Paul
about
Bettany
it one day.
month coming soon, folks. I mean, we've probably talked about him just being adjacent to some of the MCU stuff,
sure,
but he's great. He's always never had an issue watching Paul Bettany on my screen, all the way back to A Knight's Tale. Has a bit of a history with Ron Howard from A Beautiful Mind. The way he describes it is he literally called, apparently about being in the movie, texted him to acquire, basically, and I think he also worked with him on Da Vinci Code, Ron Howard. So he texted him and was like, hey, can I be in the movie? And then when the original actor for this part, Michael K. Williams, couldn't come back to reshoot due to scheduling conflicts, like, he was in. And apparently that's how Paul Bettany describes it, is he texted Ron Howard, and 2 weeks later, he was flying to go be in a Star Wars movie, which, nice work if you could get it. Really is.
Pretty cool.
But, so, just cool. And yeah, Paul Bettany's great. And like I said, he plays this role. Again, not a lot of screen time here, but does exactly what he needed to do.
I want to shout out his movie Creation. It came out in 2009. Independent movie. I saw it at a really cool theater we used to have here in Houston called the Angelica, where he plays Charles Darwin.
Man,
and he gets the act.
That's a throwback.
It's AMC now. It's so disappointing. Like, it's in the theater district. It's such a cool location, and now it's just a run of the mill AMC. Anyway, he stars alongside Jennifer Connelly, his wife, and he plays Charles Darwin. And it's about like he's about to publish. The hell's the name of Charles Darwin's famous
On the
book?
Origin of the Species.
There it is. But he knows that he will be like cast out of his church and everything. So it's about a very specific period in Charles Darwin's life, but it's such a great performance. It's one of those movies where, like, the movie's good, but you watch it for his fantastic performance. I think it's very, very good.
I love that on the Wikipedia for this movie, the first 7 credited cast members are all members of the Darwin family. Like, Paul Bettany is Charles Darwin, Jennifer Connelly, Emma, Anne, Eddie, George, Frank, Leonard. Everyone's a Darwin. No, I don't know that I've seen that, so I'll have to check that out. And yeah, his actual wife plays his on-screen wife, so that is pretty cool.
You know, they got chemistry.
You do.
All right, a few smaller.
Love hearing Paul Bettany unrelatedly talk about his marriage to Jennifer Connelly sometimes, because it's very funny, because she loves outdoor stuff and he hates it. Like, he'll talk about how she wants to go camping for a weekend, and they'll do all this planning. He was on some show and they were like, and do you like that? And he went, no. It's like, of course not. I hate it. Like, he's like, I don't enjoy this at all. But good for them.
A few quick shout outs here. Jonas Suotamo plays Chewbacca. He is, by this point, taken over the role from Peter Mayhew. I think they both played the role in The Force Awakens, but obviously with Peter Mayhew now being gone, anytime you have a live action Chewbacca, it's going to be Jonas. I don't know what it's. I like the performance. I have a hard time sort of judging that. I don't know. There's nothing bad about it. It feels and sounds like Chewbacca, which I assume he doesn't do the sound. He's just doing the physical presence, but it's good. The man's tall. He looks like Chewbacca. And I do like, I feel like we're seeing a different Chewbacca. He looks a little more slender. He looks younger. He moves a little faster. But you just gotta shout the guy out. It's doing the hard work. Glad we don't have a CG Chewbacca.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad that this character has largely always stayed Practical. Yeah, Junis is a former professional basketball player. He is apparently 6'11", which is nuts.
Wow.
So yeah, Force Awakens, he shares the role with Peter Mayhew and Ian White, and then he takes over the role proper, starting with Last Jedi and then into Solo and Rise of Skywalker. Ian White is a alum of the show from Alien versus Predator. He's 7'1", also a former basketball player. He also was in Game of Thrones and Prometheus. But yeah, if you're tall, you can play Chewbacca is basically what I'm getting. So no issues there. But yeah, not a lot of screen time, not a lot to work with, but always glad to see Chewbacca.
And then Jon Favreau provides the voice of Rio, who's a member of their team that also dies in that first mission, but has about as much screen time as the character of Val, but he's really far down on the cast list. It's almost like it's almost like more of a cameo on Jon Favreau's part. I guess he's just providing the voice, not physically there on set, presumably. But I like this character. It's another Star Wars has a pretty good track record with these alien sidekick type characters. He's like a 4-armed pilot, and he's a little short guy, and he seems really cool. Has a lot of personality. He's got a touching death, and it's great. I like this a lot.
Yeah, it's good. I like it a lot too. Star Wars is known for you texted me about that Fisto statue, and you were just like, this character has no dialogue, and I was like, that's Star Wars, man. Like that bit side
it's a
$200 kind of looks cool.
$75 statue of Kit Fisto, specifically based on his appearance in Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, where again, like you just said, he has no dialogue. He shows up, gets quickly dispatched of by Palpatine. What? Who's spending $300 on this? Somebody. That's
no one.
Someone's buying. They wouldn't be making it if no one was buying it. Andrew? Is there a property? Is there either a property you're such a big fan of, or a small character in another universe that you're such a big fan of that you would, maybe not $300, but you would be interested in purchasing a toy or statue or figure of that character?
I don't purchase toys, statues, or figures.
Is this a true statement, Andrew?
Generally, yes. I don't really go for statues and figures and stuff. I don't really do that.
Okay. You have a lot of nerd stuff in my head. Like I'm scanning. I know you do like books and posters and stuff. So
there's a couple of little tchotchke type things behind me, but I try to avoid that stuff just because I got enough stuff. I have so much stuff that I don't need. Like I almost went down the Transformers rabbit hole and saved myself, where I was like, okay, don't do this. Don't start collecting Transformers. Like my brain is like, you only want Soundwave, but Soundwave is gonna lead to Grimlock, and Grimlock is gonna lead to, well, I need an Optimus Prime, and then I'm gonna look over at Metroplex and be like, Metroplex is cool, and before I know it, I got a whole shelf of Transformers, and Liz is like, you can move out now.
Fair enough, Andrew. Fair enough. All right. There's other bit parts. Maybe we'll talk about them.
I would absolutely buy a poster for Surf Ninjas, though.
Well, I'm gonna put your money where your mouth is, Andrew. I'm about to find you the coolest Surf Ninjas poster. Send you a link. We'll see if you make a purchase. Okay, Andrew. Let's talk about the scenes of this film, and let's just start with the best scene of the movie, or at least our personal favorite. So, Andrew, in your opinion, when is this film firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Solo, a Star Wars story? Andrew, do you think if they just called it Solo, less people would go see it because they wouldn't know it was about Han Solo?
Yeah, I think they would be really upset it wasn't about Red Cups, but it's
a Star Wars story. I don't know. It's branding.
That's the only way people knew it was a Star Wars related thing. Otherwise, they would have just seen Solo and been like, "This could be about anything."
I mean, I get why they do a Star Wars story. It doesn't upset me as much as something like, a Knives Out mystery. But we mentioned before, 007, they do it right. They've all got their own original titles. The marketing's going to let you know it's about James Bond. Just call the movie what makes sense, Rogue One. Solo, or anyway. Sorry.
I also unrelated. This movie is the first one to not utilize, or I don't remember. Does Rogue One do the same thing this movie does, where the blue text actually gives us all the setup
dude,
and there's no
I
crawl?
want to talk about this. We'll get to favorite scenes in a minute. You bring this up. I was thinking the exact same thing. I saw this and I was like, well, I guess we should say this movie opens with the blue text. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Normally in Star Wars, the next thing you see is Star Wars real big, the opening theme, and a text scroll through space, right? We all know this. This movie does not do that. It does in a galaxy, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And then it keeps doing the same font title screens to give us it's like the same type of stuff we would get in a scroll, but only using the blue text. Andrew, hashtag PP. I didn't love this. If you're going to give me the exposition, give me the exposition in the way you've always done it in a Star Wars movie. If you want to rebrand this because it's not a main story, it's not a mainline Star Wars movie, then don't do a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away in the same text. Like, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too by giving us what we know and then putting a twist on it. I was baffled by this. I was probably more upset by it than I should have been, but I had the same thought as you. Did Rogue One do this? Did Rogue One? And I could have went and looked, Andrew, but you know what? I didn't. I haven't looked. I don't know what Rogue One does, but
I don't mean to point this out, but while you were there yapping, I went and checked. No,
okay.
So I just checked. No, it does not. It opens with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And then it cuts to the planet and the Imperial shuttle coming down and landing and grabbing.
I like that.
Mads Mikkelsen.
I like that.
So it does the long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and then cuts to the movie. And so because I saw it like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And I was like, all right. I was like, okay. And then it kept going, and it was like, I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. You don't get this. This isn't how this works.
And you know what else, Andrew? I could not tell you right now a single thing that blue text tells us in the beginning of this movie. And you know what? It doesn't matter. They could have cut it out and they experienced the movie the exact same way, which is true of most opening exposition dumps. But, sorry, that's not a very hashtag positivity podcast, but.
No, I agree. I saw that and was like, that's weird.
Yeah, it was weird. It irked me. But hey, what's your favorite scene in the movie?
I'm going with the train heist, the attempted train heist. I think this is just a cool action-filled sequence. I like this train, how it kind of cycles around this track as it goes through, like a weird roller coaster almost. You get a lot of high tension here, a bunch of thrilling sequences, just a really cool action set piece. This is our first kind of shot of this kind of crew in action. And it goes terribly wrong. It goes quite terribly. Basically, the only ones that really make it out alive are Han Solo and Tobias Beckett. Nobody else really does. They lose Jon Favreau's character that we mentioned. They lose. So that was Rio Durant. They lose Val Beckett. It does not go well. But the way this sequence is kind of outlined, these pirates that are showing up, first off, space pirates, just a cool thing. This is kind of like a space version of like Tusken Raiders or something. Just very cool, very thrilling. I like the way this is all put together. I like the ultimate kind of finish. Like Chewbacca's here too at this point, I guess. Where we've taken this cargo ship that's supposed to be a deliverable to Crimson Dawn, and Paul Bettany, which is where they, reunite with Kira. But the pirates have a hold of it. Han Solo's got a hold of it. And Tobias is basically like, you better hang on to it. Otherwise, this has basically all been for nothing. But Han Solo gives up and lets go of it. And the other guys can't hold on to it either. And it just crashes down and blows up, leading to, it's called some tension between Tobias and Han Solo for the failure of this mission. But it's just very high stakes, very thrilling, very cool. Constructed around this interesting train, the way they put that all together. And yeah, I like it. It's very cool.
The train design is super cool because there's a train on top and on bottom of the tracks. It just looks, it's such a simple thing, but it does so much to make it stand out and feel otherworldly. even though a heist or an action scene on top of high speed train is something we've actually seen a lot, but it's always awesome. Mission Impossible, Captain America, the first Avenger, the Wolverine, all great high speed train scenes. I'm sure there's more, but it's a winning formula for a reason. Um, I love this, and I love love's the wrong. It's interesting that the plan fails. Like they go through a lot, they lose people, and they fail. You typically expect the heroes to win or get away with it, and that gets subverted quite a number of times in this movie, which is it can be refreshing. I like it. This is a great pick, Andrew. I'm going a different direction though, but only because this movie is actually full of pretty cool set pieces and pretty cool scenes. What I want to highlight as my favorite is what I'm calling the droid uprising led by L3. So the next mission they go on once they get the Millennium Falcon is they're supposed to be stealing this unstable resource. Forgive me, I don't remember the name of it. We'll just call it unobtainium. They're trying to steal it from where it's being mined by a team of droids and basically imprisoned people and slaves. While they're there, they're just gonna unobtainium. They're just gonna be in and out to steal the. The plan is just to get in and out, steal this. They got to deliver it super fast, but they end up freeing the droids and the slaves sort of in the process and get caught up in this again small scale rebellion. And L3 in particular gets really caught up in it and being the leader and feeling in charge and feeling like she's doing something great. It's L3 is one of my favorite characters in the movie, and this is like her big moment to shine. A lot of cool stuff. I think every character gets a moment to shine, which is why I wanted to highlight it. Kira, when left alone with these guards, takes them out, and the shot is like through a door. Like she's locked in a room with them. There's just a square of glass you can see, and Kira, who's wearing like this cloak, dives down, and you don't see what happens. You just see her cloak kind of fly by a few times, and then when the doors open up, she's the only one left standing. And L3 reacts, just goes, whoa, that was awesome. And it's cool that we don't actually see exactly how she took him down. We just see, again, the cloak, L3's reaction. Interesting way to convey that. We see Chewie, who is helping free some Wookiees that are imprisoned there. And for a moment is sort of torn with going with his own kind or sticking with Han Solo. We meet some other Wookiees. There's a great moment where Han introduces himself to another Wookiee, and he says, hey, I'm Chewie's friend Han. And the Wookiee just pats Han on the head like he's a little pet. I got to chuckle at that. There's a lot of great character moments. And ultimately, pretty heart-wrenching moment where L3 gets destroyed. Lando risks his life to try to salvage her, is only able to salvage like her upper half and her mainframe, which I mentioned earlier eventually gets put into the Millennium Falcon. But Donald Glover and his anguish over losing his friend L3 is palpable. And by this point in the movie, like, you get it, because we've come to get to know L3 as a character, and her loss is felt. I would say her loss is felt more than the character of Val or Rio earlier in the movie. I think this is probably the most impactful death in the movie.
Absolutely. I think so. And then it's a bit of a retcon because, like you said, ultimately L3's mainframe personality is uploaded into the Millennium Falcon, implying that it's still there during the original trilogy. And they may have eventually
Would that be
more of that later, but
a retcon or just explaining something that we never?
Yeah, I guess in one of the movies they say that the Millennium Falcon has a very particular dialect. I guess this doesn't technically go against that. But or rather, I guess, shall I say a further explanation?
Sure.
But it is a cool little ripple that, again, you can assume that a lot of this stuff was meant to be picked up on in future movies. And ultimately, it wasn't. But no, this scene, it's a great example. It's a great example of what we're talking about with Lando, that character being very effective. he sells that relationship with L3, and you feel that loss. Like you said, it's very, very comes across extremely well.
L3 has this great moment where she's alone with Kira, and she's asking if Kira and Han are an item, or she's interested. And Kira's like, "Oh, no, 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 we're just friends." And L3 goes, "Oh, please, it's just us. You can tell me." Like, she's just shy of saying, like, just between us girls. It's and then she confesses that, like, Lando's obviously really into me, but I'm just not ready for a relationship.
Yeah.
It's a great character moment for again, a droid, which is really cool.
Yeah, good stuff. Great stuff, even.
Andrew, I want to talk about our introduction to Chewie. First, okay, so Chewbacca is this creature that's being kept in this pit, and the Imperial Army throws their enemies down there to be eaten. That's what they say, to be eaten. Now, when Han gets down there, he knows a little bit of the Wookiee language, and they hatch a plan to escape together. But Han's not the first person that's been thrown in this pit. Andrew, has Chewbacca canonically eaten humans?
Canonically, no, probably not.
No? I mean, that seems to be heavily implied by this movie. They've thrown people down there to be eaten by Chewie. Would it have to happen on screen for it to be canon?
I guess so. No, you're right. That's what it is. Maybe it's not always humans thrown into the pit. I don't know.
It doesn't matter if it's a different life form. Who cares about them? I thought that was
humans.
I'm kind of surprised they didn't establish like they just captured Chewie. Like he's never had to do this before, but he's been down there a while. In fact, I'd like his look here, real mangy. Like we've never seen him look quite like this, all full of mud. It looks like a Bigfoot basically. Normally he's got some pretty nice volume to his fur, but this is definitely a different look for Chewie. Again, like I mentioned, he's younger, he's a little more slender. He can frickin' move, better than we've ever seen him move before, which is funny because, like, obviously technology is allowing that to happen. Just like we're better about putting a guy in a suit and making it functional and stuff. But also, by virtue of this being a prequel and it being a younger version of the character, it makes sense within the universe that he's a little more agile here. So they, really lucked out with that. But I like his introduction. I like that, Han knew a little bit of Wookiee, and that's how he was able to kind of form that bond. And let me just get this out of the way real quick. Now, I sent you a text about the number of questions this movie is answering and how convenient it is that there's one adventure where Han Solo gets his last name, meets Lando, gets the Millennium Falcon, meets Chewbacca. I mean, gets his blaster, learns to spin his gun. Like, everything we know about this character happens in one adventure. But I think this movie, this first pairing of Chewie and Han still managed to feel like pretty organic. Like, we all know, like, oh, it's the first time they're together, but the movie's not going out of its way to be like, and here's Chewie. He's kind of just a character. We know the importance, and the movie just goes along.
Yeah, I agree. I think the idea that obviously we see Chewbacca in Episode 3. We have no idea what's happened to him between then and now. It doesn't really matter. I guess Chewie, a Star Wars story, is just a tough sell because nobody speaks English. But it's
What if they did it like Apocalypto style, where it's like on the Wookiee planet and they're speaking their language, there's just subtitles.
Dude, I would unironically love that. It would be so funny.
I mean, do you think there even could, that like Klingon eventually becomes like a quote unquote real language? Like, I think Game of Thrones has one. Like, there's these made up languages where, like, yes, this sound means this word, but the Wookiee language is just more or less the same growl over and over again. Do you think there's like it's hard. I don't know. Maybe it's just my human ears are hard to hear the nuances of the Wookiee language.
It's
But
like a dog thing. Like you have to have dog hearing in order to understand the nuance of it.
right. There's yeah.
But Han understands it. So who knows? But anyway, I do like this scene a lot. I think it's a cool way to introduce the character. Like you said, obviously Chewie has been here for a while, looking kind of mangy. Definitely been through the ringer, and assumedly eating human. So all good.
Andrew, I have a very specific moment I want to ask you about. Get your thoughts on this. Han, he's escaping his planet, and he's just looking for a way out. And there's like this propaganda video for joining the Imperial Navy. And in this commercial, in the Star Wars universe, it's playing the Imperial March. The score from the original trilogy, the bad guy theme, my personal favorite Star Wars theme, as I've established, is in universe playing in this propaganda video. Does this irk you, or is this a fun touch?
I don't have any hard feelings on it.
No? I thought it was an interesting choice. I thought it was a little...
Yeah.
I guess I agree. I don't have any hard feelings. I'm not like, this is garbage. But I was like, that's bold. That's bold. To make a John Williams score canonically propaganda, you know. I thought that was... I'm not sure I would have made that choice. It didn't ruin the movie, take me out of it or anything. But I thought that was... kind of just put there so we could all have that Leo point moment. We go, oh, I know that. I know that score.
John Williams did record some music for this. He doesn't actually score it, but he did record some demos and some stuff. And ultimately, I think it's John Powell that does the actual score. But Williams did contribute several demos, basically, of ideas that Powell then did factor into his score. But yeah, it's a choice.
I do like a lot of the design, the planet of Corellia, you know, where they come from. Like, it's the hard streets of space. Like, everything's very industrial. Doesn't like
very
people
Blade
have
Runner-esque.
a lot of money. Yeah. But it done very well, though.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Lots of cool designs
like
here.
Yeah.
I don't remember the character's name because my note just says this worm thing rules, but like the boss of the gang, that's just this worm that comes out of a
Lady
pit.
Proxima.
Love that design. I love that this weird worm is in charge and like they got to stay in the dark and like the sun. We learned so much about this character in this one little scene. It's again another hallmark of the Star Wars series. These cool ass alien designs. I thought that was pretty rad. But this whole, again, the Corellia design, another memorable planet in the storied Star Wars saga.
Yeah, it's cool. Like you said, just, you know, that's part of like the part of the hallmark of this. Just make, even if it's a minor bit part, put in the work, make the character memorable, make it stand out. And for years, that was enough to get you a whole book written in the expanded universe. That was all it took. But you know, in another world, there's a whole book about Lady Proxima, or Clint Howard's. What is it, Ralakili? Where his character's name is.
He's like running the underground droid fighting. In my notes, I just said BattleBot because that's what I thought.
It's what it is. Rock and Soccer Robots, if you will. But it is, it's a Ron Howard movie. You know, Clint Howard's going to be somewhere.
He's going to show up somewhere. Oh boy, what a interesting looking human being Clint Howard is. And he seems to like be aware and weaponize the way that he looks.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
He leans into it.
Like it's funny to me because when I look at Clint Howard, I do have a thought of immediately just like, that's unfortunate that you look like this.
What if Clint Howard is just like the most striking, handsome man? He just like he insists on being covered in makeup in every movie. What if it's all a ruse? What if he like lives his life as like a dashing silver fox, but he insists on having a bald cap and
like
Fake
shaves
teeth.
his head to be bald and stuff.
It's funny because he looks like Ron Howard. Like I
But he
believe they're
does. That's what
brothers.
I was
But
getting
Ron
at.
Howard looks like a
Ron Howard
normal
doesn't
human
look weird.
being.
Like,
Clint Howard, like the bizarro Ron Howard.
That was the point where I was getting to like Clint Howard is one thing, and then you look at Ron Howard and you can clearly tell the men are related. But you look at Ron Howard on his own and you're like, yeah, this is fine. Like, this looks like a normal guy. But like, there's something between them. Oh my god. Oh man. I mean, literally, like his part in like, what is it, The Water Boy? He like stands up and basically says, "Yeah, I'm ugly." Like that's what his character basically does.
And even Ed TV, where he just has like this he's just we occasionally cut to Clint Howard in a van monologuing about hair plugs or something. Like it's always about his appearance.
Hey, money is money, I guess. Clint
I'm
Howard
sure
has been in like 200 more
man.
movies than I have, so.
Oh man. Andrew, the Millennium Falcon. This is not a hot take at all, but probably my favorite sci-fi ship in any media. It's obviously up there with like the Enterprise or what are the Battlestar Galactica ships called? There's some ships that are very, very well known. Millennium Falcon, maybe the most. What do you think? What do you think is the most recognizable ship in sci-fi media? Is it the Falcon?
I think the traditional flying saucer is probably the most like easily identifiable.
Okay, named ship. I'm talking about named specific ship. Although I agree, a flying saucer is probably the most trademark or not trademark, recognizable.
Yeah. Yeah, the Millennium Falcon's probably up there.
Okay, it's my favorite.
So
I love this design.
The Enterprise probably too. I do love the Enterprise design. That idea they came up with those as unpractical as it may be impractical. But yeah, the Millennium Falcon has got to be, as far as named ships go, it's got to be towards the top.
I had this super cool Millennium Falcon toy as a kid. Now, I didn't grow up a super big Star Wars fan. I've said this. In fact, I probably had this toy before I ever saw Star Wars. But that's kind of what happens when you grow up getting toys from Goodwill and garage sales. You just get whatever you get. So I was super familiar with like elements of the Star Wars universe before I ever knew about Star Wars. But the Millennium Falcon I had was really good size, probably like a foot long. And Millennium Falcon like has those forks at the front. Those were hinges for it to fold open. And on the inside, you could play like with little figures. I don't, the chess game that's played. I'm sure it has it's space chess or it has some name or whatever. But that little board was in there. You could turn like the cannon and stuff. It was awesome. I love the design of this thing. I love the cockpit being off to the side. That's super weird and different. I love the engine. Like it's just this blue and white stripe across the back. That's super unique. Even in the Star Wars universe, I don't see a lot of other ships being propelled that way. I love everything about this design, and we get a lot of Millennium Falcon here.
We do.
I'm always happy to see that guy.
Yeah, there's a whole, like, the Parsec, the Kessel Run here is probably a great scene to talk about. The idea.
Oh, yeah, another thing that also happens in this one thing is we learn what the Kessel Run.
To reveal. And they also had to, like, get around, this is definitely one of, like, the over-explaining things that, you can criticize a little bit. Just that notion of, like, the whole joke of the original movie is that, parsecs are time, not distance, I believe.
Well, in real life, it's distance,
not time.
Right.
Distance, not time. And so he kept saying, I made the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. And I have always assumedly read that as Han's just talking out his ass. Like, he's just making it up. Like, he's just he's just bloviating, basically. Like, trying to build himself up. And this movie goes to the great extent of explaining that he's not lying when he says that. Here's why it's true. And it's one of those things where you're like, okay. Like, we didn't.
Is the explanation because he took a shortcut? That's what's impressive? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I
the Kessel Run is basically this area that you are only supposed to be able to get through in 20 parsecs. And he gets through it in 12 somehow. But Well, 12 when you round down.
Right,
I
right.
do like that they even throw that joke in where even that is still he's still technically lying when he says 12. But
Right.
it's a but this whole sequence where they're just flying the Falcon through this, they run into that weird space squid creature thing. Just really cool stuff.
Space Cthulhu. Yeah, that's what I wrote.
Yeah, just randomly hanging out in the middle of this thing. I
Which I
love
felt
that. Like
bad
I
when he
said,
died, by the way. Like
he
he
didn't
was
ask for
just
this.
hanging out. Yeah, exactly. And like it brutally dies. He gets like sucked into this wormhole. His skin is ripped off and stuff. It's like, oh my god, what did he do?
What did this man do to deserve this?
Probably
And the answer
existed for
totally
like
stuck.
2 millennia, and then Han Solo drives by, and that's the end
Yeah.
of his life.
Maybe he was tired of living. Maybe he like leaned into it. Was like, oh, a wormhole, excellent, finally.
Sweet release.
But been stuck in this cloud for 300 years. But this whole sequence is really cool. A lot of Millennium Falcon stuff. This is where I think he uploads L3 into the Millennium Falcon to kind of become the ship's computer. And it's just cool just to see them build on that lore, to just see the ship in action, because you see it a lot in the original movies, but they don't really dive into it. And here we get a lot of Millennium Falcon stuff. We have this escape pod at the front that creates a slightly different look that ejects to create
Yeah,
the
yeah.
iconic look. It's another moment where you could argue that maybe we're going a little far in explaining this. Could have just had the ship look like that. Didn't need that. There's a really cool
Yeah.
sequence here I like too, where they're in the Falcon and they're drifting up through this and they run into this, and it's a Star Destroyer on the other side, but it's like hidden in these clouds, and like there's lightning, and I don't know how there's lightning in space. I'm not going to ask about it. But it's like lighting up and like illustrating the silhouette of this Star Destroyer, like slowly drifting towards them. Just looks super cool.
Yeah.
Super
It's like
menacing.
a
It really shows the scale.
shark in stormy water. Yeah.
Like exactly that same vibe, but just shows the scale difference between these ships. And this whole sequence is just very well crafted. And like you said, it's maybe answering a question that nobody needed answered, but it still makes the most of it. And that's kind of what I think this movie does, top to bottom. Like the whole time, you're just kind of like, I'm not entirely sure why we're doing this, but if we're gonna, at least this is a blast all the way through, basically.
It's interesting. Let me use the word interesting. That a fandom that for decades thrived on comic book spin-offs and fan fiction and novels and extended universe, getting all the Star Wars they can, to now the extended stuff is like being produced as a high budget feature length film, to be like, nah, it's too much. You know, to like, we don't need that. And I know it's the fandom is thousands, millions of people, so like there's not one voice. I get it, but the irony I think is still palpable.
It is very.
There's another moment in this Kessel Run where you said they come across the Star Destroyer and they send out TIE fighters to chase them. We get a super fun chase. We get Woody Harrelson, using the cannons I mentioned a second ago. And I love this about sci-fi, is that these franchises like Star Wars or Aliens that come from the 70s or 80s, obviously when they show the futuristic technology at that time, it's limited by the current real life technology. So like the screens are like green grids
CRT
and very
type, yeah.
Yeah, so whenever you make sequels to these, you've got to keep that look. Like Prometheus, one of the best looking space movies I've ever seen. But a lot of like screens and readouts are still pretty primitive. They got to like still be in line with that alien look. In fact, it's a prequel to Alien, so it got to be even more primitive. Same thing happening here though. The readout that Woody Harrelson sees of the TIE fighter is super rough geometry, because that look has been locked in this franchise. So I find that I don't know, it's just interesting. Like I'm glad they don't redesign it and make it all modern, but like knowing that if this was the first time we saw that, it would look totally different and probably more impressive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough because there's definitely things where like you said, everything is set. Everything is the way it is. Even ship designs and stuff. Like you can't really deviate too much. The TIE fighters look a little different here. I guess because the idea is, they're tweaking it a little bit before we get to the episode 4. But yeah, it's always funny to me when you do that. Like Blade Runner ran into that problem to a degree because Blade Runner 2049 had to live in the world of Blade Runner. And so you have to have these kind of very oddly, it's a future technology that looks dated because now in the present, technology evolved away from that. So it's always kind of it's a funny little thing that they have to address because even Blade Runner is supposed to take place in the future, and now we're past that year and technology looks way different, but then the future technology has to look the same, and it always does make me chuckle.
There's a great moment in the scene where, the cannons they get destroyed. They're inoperable for whatever reason, and so they have one last TIE fighter to take out. And Han just like does a barrel roll in the Millennium Falcon and physically knocks the TIE fighter into the cloud. And there's this like audible like dink. I thought that was so fun. That it's such a cool way to take a TIE fighter out. Just ram it. So cool. Yeah, there's every Star Wars movie, regardless of quality, way I think of it, is like introducing cool new visual ideas to you in corners of the universe. There's a moment here where they go into like a club and there's a lounge singer, like an alien singing and a fish singing. It's like a fish in a glass fish bowl, and he's got a little microphone in there, and he's one of the singers. Sure, why not? Wonderful. Cool, awesome, love it. Great, love this stuff.
I have a blast anytime we do weird stuff like that. It's like when I was watching Aquaman the first time and it cut to an octopus playing the drums. I was like, greatest movie of all time. I was like, come on.
God,
what other movies got an octopus playing the drums?
Still gotta watch that movie.
Exactly. The only other movie that might is Aquaman 2. But it's I was
Ant-Man has an ant playing the drums.
Pretty cool, but ants only have 6 legs. Octopuses have 8. So I'm just saying, you could have had a spider playing the drums.
Nope.
Had an ant because it had to be Ant-Man.
Don't like that.
Yourself. You do not. I'm sorry. God, I'm sorry. I'm terribly sorry for creating that image. My bad. But yeah, no worries. You think about the Cantina Band, or like Jabba's band, or any of that stuff. Like, again, that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's part of that attention to detail. That's part of that follow through. That's part of what people love about Star Wars. Is just there's all this weird attention to detail put in the background for things that just don't matter. I'm sure there is a book or something that expands on the Cantina Band and who those guys are. And maybe they're trying to cut their first album. I don't know. Maybe there's eternal tensions. Maybe that's not the original drummer. Maybe he's the replacement that came in after they started getting local gigs because the original drummer didn't like the direction of the band. Maybe there's a Pete Best of the Cantina Band out there doing his own performances of their original song. Like, who knows? Where's this story, guys? Where's this movie? Where's Cantina Band, a Star Wars story?
There's undoubtedly a Wikipedia entry at the very least. Andrew, I had a blast with this movie. It's a lot of fun. It turns out everybody was right that saw it. Hey, that Han Solo movie, it's pretty fun. But we can't wrap this up without acknowledging a few things. First off, I really like... We haven't talked too much about the climax of this movie, but they take out Voss, and then Woody Harrelson's character, Tobias, double crosses Han. He's going to leave him for dead. But they have this standoff. Woody Harrelson, he's about to do like the typical villain bad guy thing where he monologues about why he had to do this. But as soon as he starts talking, Han pulls out his blaster, shoots him in the chest, and kills him. I like that subversion, right? That we're just gonna do what everyone in the audience is saying you should do. Like just take him out while you have the chance, right? But also, it's pretty significant why they're doing this in a Han Solo movie. The climax of a movie is Han Solo face to face with the bad guy, and he just shoots him first. Unequivocally, can't deny it. Can't retcon this one, George Lucas, because you're not, creatively in control anymore. The climax in the movie is Han shooting first, making a I would say a bold statement, but kind of a statement that everyone on this planet agrees with except for one person.
Yep.
Cheeky
It
fun,
is
yeah.
yeah, it is. And that's and there's no way that's not on purpose. There's no way that's not deliberately what they're doing. There's
1000%.
no way that's not 100% the intention here. But yeah, it just, and
Do we need to
as
explain?
Beckett,
Everyone listening to this knows the significance of that, right? I mean, everyone knows the Han shot first thing, right?
yes, of course they do.
Okay.
If you don't, drop us a note in the Discord. We'll explain. But
Yeah, don't Google it. Drop us a note in the Discord. Wait for us to respond and explain in our words. Do not Google
or
this.
wait for one of our myriad of fans to also come in. And
that would probably happen first.
Definitely. But yeah, it's and I as Beckett is dying, he literally says, "If I did the smart thing, it's what I would have done." And then, like the first step in becoming a fossil, he dies.
A weird way to phrase that, Andrew.
There's a bit. To be fair, I'm stealing that. There's the Field Museum in Chicago is like the Natural History Museum. There is a long winding path through that takes you through basically the entire history of the Earth from like the whatever they're called, the Cambrian era, whatever. But it talks about, there's a video that talks about becoming a fossil, and it says step 1, die. And
I thought for
unironically
sure,
one of the funniest
Andrew,
things I've ever seen.
When you said there's a bit, I was like, okay, he's gonna one of his random British shows that he watches. Where he got it from a museum. There's this bit this museum does in Chicago. It's great. Love that for you, Andrew. The other thing we got to talk about here is a cameo at the end of this movie. Something that I did hear about. I heard this movie is great, and I heard, oh yeah, Darth Maul shows up at the end. That's all I knew about this appearance. So going into it, I thought we were going to get a cool fight at the end with Darth Maul, but that's not what happens. They've been alluding to, Voss is answering to someone else. It's very powerful. That person turns out to be Darth Maul, who Kira talks with at the very end, and now she's working directly for Darth Maul. That's where this movie ends. If a cynical look at it is there's an entire scene dedicated to setting up another movie that we now know is never going to happen, but we get to see Darth Maul, and for the first time, a live-action Darth Maul with robotic legs. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's the first time we've seen this in live action. Darth Maul gets bisected in episode 1. In the Clone Wars show, we see him with the robot legs. And I think eventually he does die for real. So this movie is taking place in between episode 1 and his for real death. And he's got robot legs. But it's a hologram. Like, we don't actually see Darth Maul. It's him talking through a hologram. We see his dual lightsaber. Looks a little bit different now. It's got a cool design to it. He's got robot legs. But ultimately, it's just a little cameo appearance. But I'm sure Ray Park was thrilled to get to do this.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Eventually, Maul meets his end in Star Wars Rebels. We talked about this, I think, on our episode 1 episode.
I probably cut it because it was a very long rant, but maybe I didn't. I don't know.
If you didn't, so Darth Maul did return after episode 1, originally in Clone Wars. It is eventually revealed that, I believe,
where he has like spider legs. Like,
yeah,
he's got this
some wild stuff there.
Yeah.
He basically has this whole so they kind of set up Crimson Dawn in Clone Wars, this idea that he leads a whole group of different crime syndicates, and he eventually gets arrested and is gonna get taken to trial. But when that's happening, Order 66 gets executed, and Maul almost gets killed, but Ahsoka, I think, saves him so that he can be a distraction while she tries to escape. And then he escapes. Then he doesn't die there. But in Rebels, Maul comes back, which is set, I believe, 5 years before episode 4, whereas this is 10 years before episode 4. It says it's 14 years after episode 3. So 6 years before episode 1. I think episode
all this
4
math.
is 20 years later. Anyway, Maul finally has his. There's a moment where it's finally the Obi-Wan Darth Maul like final showdown on Tatooine, and that is where Maul's ultimate ends. So this obviously was intended to do more. You don't introduce somebody like Darth Maul in a cameo at the end of a movie like this and not gonna have plans to do something with it. George Lucas's original intention was, I think, Darth Maul was going to be the main antagonist of his sequel trilogy. Using the idea that he would have been like this master kind of godfather of all the crime syndicates. So they've taken that idea and kind of just moved it earlier up, which is what they tend to do with a lot of stuff. Like Thrawn was originally this big villain of the sequel of this written sequel trilogy by Timothy Zahn that I do like a lot, admittedly. But once they made Force Awakens, the new trilogy set afterwards, they shifted Thrawn up so that he was in Rebels, but now also he's also after now. He still because I know the Ahsoka show and everything like that is also using Thrawn, which I haven't watched yet. Fair, which I like Thrawn a lot. I don't know why I'm not watching it, but
Yeah, you should watch that. What else are you doing with your life, Andrew, besides watching this one streaming show?
Just staring into the void, trying to stave off my existential crisis. But other than that, I'm doing great. I'm having a great time. But anyway, yeah, Maul shows up at the end here. I don't know that I knew this was happening when I saw it. It is funny. Ray Park does play the character here. Sam Witwer provides the voice. Sam Witwer does the voice in Clone Wars and Rebels. So apparently Peter Serafinowicz was brought in to record the dialogue for this movie, but then at some point they decided to use Witwer because he had done the voice in so many other appearances. So my boy Peter Serafinowicz getting the shaft there, but they wanted to make his voice and appearance here kind of line up with, I guess, how he eventually appears in Rebels. So I get it, but yeah, it's a cool little appearance. They make sure we get to see him turn on his lightsaber for no reason, even though he's a hologram. But you got to get it. You got to show us.
And Andrew, that's it. That's a wrap. Star Wars prequel month comes to a close. We probably could have technically done Rogue One, but it's pretty well received. And it's barely a prequel. It's like a prequel by hours, 5 minutes. But I think we had a good set here. I don't know.
Also, Rogue One is extremely well received and made like $1 billion. Where no world where that is.
With the Bindle rules, pretty hard to cover that one. But is this the last Star Wars movie we're going to cover on this podcast, Andrew?
For now,
yeah. I mean, they're certainly going to make more. I guess we'll just see how that unfolds. Will they be a future episode on Best of the Rest? Will they be a Best of the Best bonus episode? I don't know. I'm sure we'll come back around to Star Wars, but that is a wrap for now, and it's time to move into a new month, a new theme, Andrew. The month of December. I'm very excited to announce what we're doing here because it's a little different. Rather than discuss holiday films like we've done in the past, our theme's going to be based around gift giving. Specifically, guests giving us a gift. That's how selfish we are. Every week in December, we're going to have a new guest featured on our podcast, and they're going to bring us a gift. That gift is any movie they want. We're letting our guest choose the film. What are they passionate about? What do they want to talk about? We're going to cover a pretty wide variety in the month of December because we're having people bring in some interesting choices. Some, I would say, are films that we would have covered at some point. Some were not on our radar. Some we probably never would have talked about if it weren't for the guest bringing us a gift. But it's a little different. It's going to be a fun way to wrap up the year. God, wrap up the year, Andrew. 2024, it's coming to a close. But I'm excited. I'm excited for this. I'm excited for everybody to hear what's in store.
Yeah, some wild stuff coming, folks, including some favorites, and like you said, a couple of wild swings too. So I'm excited about it.
If you want to see the lineup and guess ahead of time, you know what to do. Hop into that Discord server. There's a link in the show notes. Come and join us. Why haven't you done so already? But definitely come back next week for our first mystery film, our first gift we get to unwrap. And until then, just remember, maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. Check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. And check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Visit our store on TeePublic for some best of the rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way that we grow. Follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.